patak ng ulan, sa pagsubok na dumaraan, may tapang kang harap, lilipad kang may pangarap. Lilipad kang may pangarap.
Kailan ay di mag-iisa, susulong ka ng may kasama, may tapang kang haharap.
Lilipad kang may pangarap. Lilipad kang may pangarap. Simula na ng bukas, ngayon na, ngayon na. Simula na ng bukas, ngayon na, ngayon na. Simula na ng bukas, ngayon na, ngayon na, ngayon na.
Sumpay sa pagbabago,
Harapin ang bagong mundo. Simula na ng bukas. Simula na ng bukas ngayon.
Good morning. My name is RJ, your moderator for today's session on the future of retail and logistics after the e commerce boom. Just as the 2010s witnessed the growth and eventual boom of e commerce, the 2020s will undoubtedly see game changing innovations that will define the next evolution of retail and logistics. The COVID 19 pandemic has accelerated the development of new technologies. What trends and breakthroughs should businesses keep an eye on in the next 10 years? We invited experts to share insights on this. Our first speaker is an associate director of Colliers Philippines, covering office, residential, retail, leisure, and industrial segments. He conducts macroeconomics analysis and assesses the impact of the economic growth on the real estate sector. He also handles client engagement through market overview presentations to equity analysts, property investors, and real estate firms. His reports have been featured on national news programs, as well as international and national dailies. He is also regularly invited as a resource speaker by developers, real estate platforms, and industry groups. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Joey Roy Bondoc. Mr. Joey, good morning.
Hi. Hi, Ajay. Good morning.
Good morning. For your opening statement, sir.
Oh, okay. So, again, I want to thank Business World for inviting Colliers to be part of this webinar on retail and what do we expect in the future. Of course, the COVID-19 pandemic, as we always say, has affected the retail sector here in the Philippines. We see that in Metro Manila, given the strict lockdowns imposed all over the country's capital, and has affected a lot of retail establishments. You have the food and beverage, even the footwear and clothing retail stores as well. And it has increased vacancy across Metro Manila. In fact, it reached 14% as of the third quarter of 2021. And we believe that that will further increase given that a lot of retail establishments are closing. They've been migrating online, and we're seeing rents also declining. But there are opportunities in the market. We see dark groceries proliferating across Metro Manila. We also see the use of vacant spaces in malls as micro warehouses. In fact, we have a lot of developers, clients that are asking us for advice on how to utilize these vacant spaces and how they can maximize and just utilize all these vacant spaces that we're having across Metro Manila at this point. We believe that there will be a greater use of e-commerce platforms, and as we always say, retailers should always complement their brick and mortar stores with e-commerce shops, because that is where the retail segment here in the Philippines practically is heading. And we believe that beyond COVID-19 pandemic, there will be a more dynamic retail sector all over the Philippines, and we're already seeing a lot of mall operators really adjusting to what the market requires at this point. When we had surveys during our previous presentations, majority of our respondents are saying that they are willing to pay extra fees just so they can have their deliveries or items delivered within the same day. And then majority also saying that they'll probably order their next food and beverage and other basic goods online. So definitely there'll be a greater use of these e-commerce platforms, and again, we'll redefine the retail market that we have here in the Philippines. And at the Colliers, we always advise our clients, the developers, the mall operators, to always innovate based on what they see in the market, and the trends that are really dominating the retail landscape of the Philippines at this point. So definitely, while we see some challenges, there are opportunities, there are new trends emerging, and the retail players, the mall operators, should be more proactive in embracing and adjusting to these changes that we see in the market.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Joey. Now, for our second speaker, he is the founder and chief executive officer of the Prosperna, an e-commerce platform for small and medium enterprises in the Philippines. His background includes 12 years of Silicon Valley executive leadership experience, which is highlighted by growing an over $16 million division for Salesforce.com and starting two divisions for Cornerstone On Demand. Before moving to the Philippines to raise the bar of the local tech industry, he was the North America Vice President of Sales for Zero Small Business Cloud Accounting Software. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Dennis Velasco. Good morning, Mr. Dennis.
Hey, RJ, so awesome to be here. And I really love the awareness that y'all at Business World bring to the Philippine business community. And
Thank you.
anyway, good to be here and share some thoughts and ideas. So, as you and many or others may not know, here at Prosperna, we believe on a huge mission, and that's to empower 100,000 Philippine MSMEs with what we believe is very simple and affordable e-commerce software. We call our community actually the Prosper Nation. And since it's really all about empowerment and how technology, we believe, can build a better Philippines, even though I'm a tech guy, and we're building a lot of cool, exciting technologies. For us, it's really more about the big picture. And along with the big picture comes what we believe are very positive results for Philippine businesses, for our country, the economy, for everyone, including the workforce and consumers alike. So if you take a look at technology in itself, when societies embrace technology, it's known to bring economic growth, strength, and an advantage for everyone in its ecosystem. So, in order for us to get a quick glimpse on what's happening today and what's going to happen in the future, I mean, let's just take a little quick look at what technology has done historically. I mean, even from the very beginning of mankind, right? When the wheel was invented, right, RJ, it enabled us or people to travel farther distances across land. And then fast forward, that really changed society in those days. And then come along the Egyptians, who then discovered how to and started creating boats, which not only allowed them to travel, in even farther distances between and across land masses, right? Both of these examples are other examples of technology that today we take for granted that have made major economic and social transformations. So today, when you look at technology like e-commerce and logistics, it's helping customers and companies increase their communications. It's making business for them easier, and it's enabling access to new markets, new products, and new services. So personally, I believe that what we're going through today is going to change the face of the Philippines economy and our society forever. Let's take a little bit deeper of a drill down, right? So even for the workforce, if you look at human resource studies and even the Philippine consensus reports locally, research shows that the technology workforces, technology jobs, people in technology, RJ, they're making 85% more in higher compensation than other occupations, right? That's the big picture that we're talking about, right? And that's one of the things that e-commerce is driving, right? Because as e-commerce grows, our company has grown, which we provided a lot more, economic growth for the people that have joined Prosperna. So talk about an economic game changer for the Philippines as a whole. That's really cool, right? Now, for companies and consumers, it's all about convenience in how they work together. I mean, we're all consumers, right, RJ? And uh, I think we would probably agree that even though the statistics show that 83% of consumers say that convenience is the most important thing today versus what convenience meant 5 years ago, e-commerce is making convenience easier for businesses and consumers to work together. And with e-commerce growing at at least a 36% compounded annual growth rate, we've all got to get ready because we are rapidly changing and adopting new consumer behaviors, and that's a huge opportunity. So with that growth on the retailer side, clearly businesses were massively disrupted, and now companies of all sizes are finding ways to give their consumers better access to their products and services anywhere and anytime. So if you think of that and you even go beyond perhaps trying to win your category of business, you as a business have got to improve your customer shopping experience, right? And again, that's the opportunity. And so we love the future potential of what e-commerce and our country has to do. And we're looking forward to the bright prospects of what our country is going to realize in the next 3, 5, and 10 years. I don't know. What are your thoughts, RJ, on what's happening?
Well, customer experience is what we are going to talk about today among the many topics, among the many issues here in this logistics and e-commerce. Now, to start, anyway, let's have all our speakers back on screen. Hi, Sir Joey. Now, my first question is actually related to that. Mr. Joey has already mentioned a lot about what has been happening in this pandemic, but we want more details. Given the massive growth of e-commerce, how have the retail and logistics industries changed over the past year and a half? From your
Well,
observation, sir. Yeah.
at Colliers Philippines, we always say that the e-commerce sector has really complemented the physical presence of retailers of the brick and mortar shops, especially across Metro Manila. In fact, this also raised the demand for a lot of warehouses across the capital region. So at Colliers, we also cover the industrial sector. So this has raised the demand for warehouses in Metro Manila, within Metro Manila especially, because right now the trend and demand is going towards the direction of having your goods delivered within the same day or the following day. So this has raised the demand for warehouses near Metro Manila, in suburban areas, in industrial locations, in Southern Luzon, as well as Central Luzon. In fact, we get a lot of queries from companies that are planning to occupy or lease warehouses in the northern Metro Manila area. So you have the likes of Caloocan, Malabon, Navotas, and Valenzuela area. Now, outside of Kamanava, we are also seeing a greater demand for these facilities in the Bulacan as well as sa Pampanga area. And we have a lot of developers that are in fact developing and are modernizing warehouses. That is one interesting trend, RJ, that we are seeing in the property space at this point. A lot of property players, developers, modernizing their standard factory buildings. In fact, the industrial sector and these warehouses are likely to be part of the REIT listing and REIT investments of a lot of property players, because these warehouses are generating recurring income, and these are very good assets to be divested into your REIT vehicles moving forward. Now, having talked about the demand for warehouses in Metro Manila and in Northern and Central Luzon, of course, you have the Cavite, Laguna, Batangas area, which traditionally has been a hub for these warehouses, micro warehouses, and standard factory buildings. And over the past few quarters, we have seen lease rates or rents of these warehouses increasing. In fact, based on our research, the lease rates of warehouses are even growing at a much faster pace compared to lease rates of land for lease in the Cavite, Laguna, Batangas region. So again, what propels this increase in rents? Definitely the demand for warehouses because a lot of people are practically ordering online. You have to note that the Philippines is primarily a consumption driven economy. 70% of our economy is covered by personal consumption, and since we are in a lockdown, practically the Philippines is a lockdown economy at this point. And a lot of people have really been ordering online. In fact, one proxy that we use that indicates the increasing demand for deliveries for e-commerce is the aggressive use also of e-wallets as well as e-payment schemes, the likes of GCash, Paymaya. When we had another survey during our previous briefing at Colliers Philippines, more than 50%, close to 60% of our respondents saying they are now using these e-payment platforms, the likes of GCash, Paymaya. So this is really the direction where a lot of consumers are heading, and only indicative of the rising demand for e-commerce and more people really embracing e-commerce, online shopping. But that does not necessarily mean that it's the end of the brick and mortar story for the retail sector here in the Philippines, especially once the government eases lockdown. We believe that there will be revenge dining, revenge shopping. And if the government eases this stricter lockdown across Metro Manila and more people are inoculated and Metro Manila achieves herd immunity and population protection, somehow we're likely to see a recovery of consumer foot traffic across malls in Metro Manila. But until then, definitely we will see a greater consumption of goods and these delivery platforms that a lot of retailers and mall operators are operating. And again, another indicator of this growing demand for e-commerce is even the operators of physical malls across Metro Manila launching their own personal shopping platforms, right? So definitely, this is one example of how developers have innovated and how they've really tweaked their offerings to Filipino consumers.
Thank you, Sir Joey. You mentioned modernizing warehouses. I wonder what that actually looks like. Mr. Velasco, do you have an idea of what it looks like exactly? Have you
Yeah,
seen a smart warehouse?
yeah. In fact, and first, let me. I think Joey, great to hear the insights about modernization of warehouses and that there's an increase of growth of warehouses. The logistics is going to absolutely be, one of the pieces of the infrastructure, to serve consumers and bring consumers and merchants together. Yeah, in fact, DHL and LBC are, some of the major players amongst many, many others who are rapidly adopting new technologies in the warehouse to create low touch, frictionless environments, right? Because their employees were also hindered by the lack of transportation. So, if you remember 18 months ago, there was a big supply chain crunch because products and services were not able to move, right? So you can see, as we'll talk, I think a little bit later, more about robotics, et cetera, right? But Yeah, I think you'll see a ton more. And I've got some things to share about some of the options that I think will help consumers and merchants too.
Hmm. All right. How about the supply chains in general? How have these actually adapted to the disruptions posed by the COVID-19 pandemic?
Yeah, my opinion is, the pandemic has placed a unprecedented stress that no one was prepared for. There was no warning signal, right? And so food supply chains, as I mentioned, bottlenecks in terms of labor and the workforce, the processing of goods and services, transportation, this was all just turned upside down. So it really changed the dynamic between supply, demand, and the ability to fulfill that demand. So it's interesting because in the very beginning, 18 plus months ago, you saw a consumer behavior trend where stockpiling was kind of the thing, right? The what do you call that? The nervous buying or warehousing of people buying stuff. And luckily, the supply chains have adapted over that time. But then, as the adaptation continued, you still saw stresses in the supply chain. So as behavior and interest changed, there were then uh, category specific shortages. As a very, very simple example, RJ and Joey, I don't know if you guys, what your hobbies are, or if you like biking or cycling, but, the bicycle prices have gone up by 30 plus percent. It's hard to get components, right? um, and even since food processing slowed down, right? You saw this uh, uh, homegrown and home fresh and even the plantita phenomenon start to grow. People who had no real interest in that started finding new experiences and pleasures and hobbies, right? And that really shifted how people bought fresh, right? Because fresh was hard to get. So anyway, just a couple thoughts there on the supply chain side. I'm sure Joey has some things to add.
Yeah, sir, Joey.
Well, I agree with what Dennis mentioned. These hobbies that we developed during Metro Manila lockdown, or even lockdown across the Philippines, has really increased the demand for certain items, bicycles, and then even their parts. I follow Decathlon on Facebook, and I really see a lot of ads and bicycles that they are selling, and then these discounts that they have been offering. So definitely, this has increased the demand for these services, for these goods that really became popular during this lockdown. Even the prices of plants soared by what, 100, 200, 300%. And I really see that online. So definitely, we're seeing a lot of shifts in consumer preferences. And again, similar to what I mentioned earlier, these are all driven by an economy that is practically is still in a lockdown. And we believe that beyond COVID-19 pandemic, um, you know, it's probably difficult to imagine returning to pre-pandemic retail preferences or retail trends. Probably we will see a newer and better retail trends, right, reshaping the Philippine retail market. And we're really looking forward to those trends. And overall, what we see in the retail landscape is this continued support of the online and e-commerce presence to the brick and mortar shops that we have in malls across the country.
Joey, you know what I love? uh, RJ, what I love to see about what's happening, despite all the pressure and the doom and gloom, is we're seeing an amazing increase in new brands that are emerging, right? Not only are there new brands emerging, but there are some brands that are emerging that are actually 100% online businesses, right? We've got some clients, CookieDudePH.com, arguably the best cookie in the world. I've got a sweet tooth. I'm sure a lot of my other fellow Filipinos love desserts and sweets, but they were a result of the pandemic business, right? Um, right, wrong, or indifferent, people still like to have fun at home. Somas at South.com, another Persona client, they bring handcrafted beer direct online to your home, right? So after a long week of Zoom meetings, right, there are these kinds of businesses that have found these opportunities. And I also am super encouraged to see a lot of the existing small business brands. There are many companies, as you know, right, Joey, in a lot of the malls and traditional retail, there was, I'm curious to see what's going to happen to the bazaars, right? But there was these small business brands that are always at the bazaars, right? That was their channel. That's how they built their business, right? And some of those companies have really adapted online. I'm sure you guys know Po Kwang, the famous Filipina comedian, right? She is a wonderful cook. She's got a online food business called Pokely Foods, and for them, their business was absolutely previously dependent on the bazaars, and they have switched to online, right? But what's interesting, even more so, is now we are starting to see a lot of interest and demand from the larger, more quote unquote traditional companies who tend to actually, by nature of being larger, take a little bit more time to make decisions and change. They are also embracing online. Imagine, RJ, Joey, the next time here, this holiday, you want to buy some fine jewelry for your significant other, you can go to ShebwanaJewelry.com, right? One of our, proud customers, and they are selling their fine jewelry from 2,500 locations. Who used to sell them in their traditional locations, you can buy them all online, right? So it's going to be really interesting where you then see this blend, because companies have both invested previously in the traditional brick and mortar, are now investing in the online, and then the future will be this blended, as we've seen in other countries, bricks and clicks. And that's just nothing but positive good news for Philippine MSMEs. Anyway, just my 2 cents there.
Well, both of you agree that there's high demand, but we also see a lot of frustrations among our consumers, shipping delays for one. So, what kind of changes or adjustments do we need to see in order to, accommodate such a high demand?
Yeah. Joe, you want to take that? You might be spending a lot of time with a lot of those companies facing that question, right?
The problem initially for a lot of retailers is how do they reach last mile delivery point. So that was the initial problem that they encountered, especially here in Metro Manila. Delivery to the fringe locations, areas that are far from the central business hubs. So what they did was, they explored the viability of having micro warehouses within Metro Manila. And as I mentioned, we have a lot of developers that are already exploring the feasibility of converting these vacant mall spaces into micro warehouses so as to enable their retailers to achieve their commitment of delivering within 24 hours during the same day. And definitely, this is something that is worth exploring, especially for developers that have a lot of vacant spaces at this point. As I mentioned earlier, vacancy already breaching 10% in malls across Metro Manila. We're looking at vacancy rates reflective of vacancies that we saw during the Asian financial and global financial crisis. So definitely there is a need for mall operators, developers to adjust. And this is one way of doing that because they're able to maximize their vacant spaces and at the same time enable their retailers to commit to a 24-hour delivery service. So definitely this will likely be part of the newer and better normal beyond 2021, beyond the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Joe.
Just to add to that, RJ, yeah, I think honestly, again, as a consumer, there's a ton of frustration currently today. There's still a lot of friction between merchants and consumers, and I know we've all experienced this. So, but I think there's some upside, right? So, you know how, like on social media, people post products and services, and sad to say, but in my own terms, they're kind of fake posts because they're promoting a product that's actually not in stock, right? And as you and all of us had mentioned earlier in the beginning, it's all about convenience because the consumer will always drive the market. And, marketing studies show that a consumer will back out and not complete a transaction. Actually, 97% of consumers will back out, right? If for some reason they feel that the experience doesn't create an experience of convenience. So if merchants don't have the ability or the technology to display their inventory in real time, then they will lose out in transactions and it will prevent them from succeeding. On the flip side, those that do adopt technology will earn the trust of more consumers and survive and thrive, right? But so the convenience and using technology will make it easier, right, for for companies and consumers to remove that friction, and technology has always proven to make things better, faster, more efficient, and I think that's still goes true for today.
Thank you, Mr. Dennis. My next question is related to that. What promising technologies or innovations are you most excited about, both for e-commerce and logistics?
Yeah. So, on both sides, I think what's going to be really exciting is we are going through a rapid change in behavior. And it's really important for merchants to see that by putting themselves in the customer's shoes, right? Because we're all customers, as I've said a couple times already. So what's really exciting is as micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises of any size, what we're trying to do is make technology accessible for everyone. It used to be that technology was expensive and only available to larger companies with more money, right? But once companies start to embrace technology, they can use and get the power of and the advantage of the data, right? So, merchants that use an e-commerce platform can then start to personalize the experience and provide suggestions, right? Can remind customers about buying frequently, purchased products. And to me, that's, more efficient, more scalable, and helping promote a more successful business, which leads to a more successful economy here in the Philippines. And again, I think it's going to really change the game for our country in the next 10 years. On the logistics side, when you combine, what logistics companies are doing to improve their back end operations, and then you combine that with e-commerce platform software, now guess what? We're going to be able to give customers more options, and customers love options, right? So as an example, you want to buy this laptop, right? What if the online store said, hey, would you like to save, 500 pesos, right? Get your order delivered 3 days from now, because the system knows that it's got other deliveries in that area 3 days from now. So the logistics company can save a little bit of money, and the consumer can save a little bit of money, because the system is intelligently offered, right? If you're patient enough, we'll give you a break. At the same time, if you need that laptop now, hey, want to enjoy the convenience of same day or next day delivery? Get the laptop now for an extra X amount of pesos. So more options for consumers, and we can do that with more data, right? And empowering the entire ecosystem.
Well, you mentioned data already, but to what extent does this country is taking advantage of consumer data to, survive the crisis or thrive in this crisis?
I think that technology has become more and more accessible, right? Look at what we use today. This wonderful technology to communicate. It used to take us, as they say, time is money, right?
Hmm.
RJ. So it used to take us hours to get it together and have a production like this. Now it's taken us minutes, right? And in a snap of a finger, we're having a very meaningful conversation and spreading that awareness, right, across thousands of people in our country. So with technology becoming more affordable, the data is there. The data is there for micro, small, and medium enterprises to use. And as they say, there's no way you can improve anything in a business unless you can measure it. And that's where data comes in. So with the adoption of technology like ours, because as an example, we grew north of 260% in the last 12 months. And all I'm saying is now we've empowered 260% more MSMEs to be more successful because they have access to data like that. That to me is cool and promising. As for the rest of the world, I really can't speak to that because I don't have access to their data. But hopefully that helps a lot of others that are out there listening.
But taking your platform as an example, how does that exactly, which has data, as you said, how does that exactly help our SMEs?
Yeah. So, as more and more companies use the Prosperana platform, and when I say companies, I'm not just talking about the merchants selling products and services. I'm also talking about consumers and their buying behaviors, and I'm also talking about logistics providers, right? All that data, can be aggregated, of course, with full protection of data privacy, but the general summary of that data can be aggregated and rationalized. And then what we see and plan on delivering is data analysis reporting, right? Directly to merchants, directly to logistics providers, right? So it's not just the technology alone. It's it's the information that's in there that can be most valuable than just the software and making a sale, right? Because we can see seasonality, we can see categories, we can see last mile shipping preferences. We can see price sensitivity to promotions and discounts. And why not empower companies, with that information so that we can create a more successful business community, hence a more stronger economy. You know,
Mr. Joey, anything to add to our discussion on data?
I think, RJ, for Philippine retailers, there should be a more aggressive use of these platforms that will enable them to capture the preferences of consumers. I think there should be a greater use of technology of these applications because this is one way of adjusting to what the market really requires at this point. Again, I just want to share interesting insights that we got from our participants in an informal survey that we had in our previous presentation. So we asked them, what items are you likely to purchase online? And they mentioned that they're likely to purchase the basic goods, food and beverage, and even medicines. So definitely, those are the items that are likely to be procured online, and we believe that there should be a greater utilization of all these platforms, of course conforming with the data privacy laws of the Philippines. So I think mall operators should support their retailers, aside from providing, of course, the usual personal shopper services that we're already seeing right now. You have the likes of Shop SM, Pickaroo, Ring Rob that mall operators have been utilizing and using. And of course, these applications have really been helpful in providing convenience to a lot of consumers. But I think this is also a great way of capturing consumer preferences in the market. Google Analytics, again, this is one um, website or data set that our retailers, especially the micro, small, and medium enterprises, can tap and explore so as to really serve the demands of the consumers or the public at this point.
All right. Follow up to that, Mr. Joey. Are Filipino consumers now more willing to share personal data in exchange for better experience?
Well, what we have been reading, seeing online, and based on anecdotal pieces of evidence, Filipinos are still wary of sharing information. But what's important is that the Philippines has a well-crafted Data Privacy Act. So this should really protect the public, the consumers, and as I mentioned earlier, the retailers should work closely with the government so as to ensure that while they're able to capture the preferences of the consumers, they're also able to comply with the data privacy laws of the government.
Right. So now, still on. All right, we saw many brands closing stores during the pandemic, and we also saw very successful ones like Amazon, which harness data to thrive. What do you see in the Philippines in terms of retailers' mindset when it comes to using again consumer customer data, especially MSMEs? Are they still generally traditional now, or do they actually know what to do with data? But for Sir Dennis, I know he has the platform, and I'm not sure if he has still to explain, "Oh, this is what the data is in our platform and what we use with it." How do you present that product to them, sir? How do you ensure security,
yeah,
etc.?
yeah. So a lot of things in that. So allow me a chance to kind of unwrap that for a second. So first and foremost, data security is extremely important, but um, and data security should be just a given, right? I think what's more where we focus on, because we take data security and it's just like that's got to be lock solid. But what we want to do is give consumers and merchants control of their data, right? And that's really what people want. They want to know and they want to be in control of when they share, what they share, and why they share. So I think that's a really important component, and that's going to be great to see evolve, right? Because that just empowers the community. And we're working closely with the Department of Trade and Industry to help shape some of that policy, because that policy creates trust, and trust is really important in any free market, just like the Philippines. So we need that to continue to operate as a thriving community. So what are people doing then? Today, we're still, I think, really early in the learning stages of how MSMEs can use the data. So because a lot of this is new, and but what they're using it as, for example, is really simple things that's already we're already seeing them get the value of. So identifying bestsellers, right? Let's take a look at that concept. You ever been to a restaurant, RJ and Joey, and on the outside, it's a Japanese restaurant, right? But when you get inside, the menu, oh, they also serve Filipino food. Oh, and they also have their special spaghetti, right? And it's like, I kind of look, this is a Japanese restaurant. But do you understand that when you build a product and a menu that's that vast, right? The cost, the logistics effort associated to creating a vast menu with lots of SKUs, it creates more cost and complexity in running a business, right? Now, unlock that with e-commerce and the data that it can empower merchants with. We have merchants that have identified, wait a minute, 80% of what was on our menu, nobody was buying, right? So why focus marketing expense, logistics, ordering, right, on ingredients and food that our direct customers are not buying? And it's helped them narrow down their menu. In today's world, the online environment is you gotta attract their attention of your customer really fast. And so we've seen with the power of data, our merchants are identifying their best sellers, and they're selling, gazillions of these, of a narrower product set, right? Look at one of our wonderful customers, Lola Nenas. You guys know Lola Nenas? They've got those amazing triple cheese donuts, right? And they, again, had this classic massive menu of all kinds of Filipino delicacies. But today, the best seller and what they're promoting and focusing on is those delightful triple cheese donuts. And they are selling gazillions hand over fist, and they've got a more successful business today than ever, right? Anyway, that's just a few examples there of what's happening.
Thank you. But going back to Mr. Joey, what's gonna happen to the physical stores then? If we're talking everything about the online stores, e-commerce right now, what's going to happen to our physical stores, physical experience in the future?
Well, as I noted earlier, some of these vacant physical mall spaces at this point are being converted, repurposed into micro warehouses, especially because of the demand for same-day deliveries. But, RJ, we are optimistic that once we achieve herd immunity, population protection across the Philippines, let me start first with Metro Manila. We believe that, Filipinos will continue to go to malls. Here in the Philippines, in Metro Manila, we don't have a lot of public parks. We don't have a lot of parks, and malls, in fact, are our de facto public spaces. When we go to malls, we can do a lot of stuff. We eat, we watch movies, and renew licenses. So we do a lot of things in malls. There's a lot of services that retailers provide. And Filipinos are very, social. They really enjoy interacting with their friends, with their family members. So definitely beyond COVID-19 pandemic and as part of a better, newer normal, Filipinos definitely are expected to be on a revenge shopping and revenge dining mode. So we don't see physical stores, brick and mortar shops being phased out, but we see a stronger coordination between these physical mall spaces, the brick and mortar shops, as well as their online e-commerce side. So that's one retail trend that we're likely to see beyond this pandemic.
Oh, Mr. Joey, there's a question for you from our audience. To Joey, since government allowed for openings of retails with lower level alert by October, how would you assess this coming holiday? This coming holiday.
Typically, RJ, when you talk about the fourth quarter, that is usually the strongest quarter for a lot of retailers. However, we saw that in 2020 where there was really a subdued consumer demand. And in fact, even with remittances usually picking up fourth quarter of the year, we didn't see a significant rise in rental rates or improvement in mall occupancies in Metro Manila fourth quarter of 2020 because of the pandemic and lockdown that was still in place across Metro Manila during the fourth quarter of 2020. But we are really hoping that with Metro Manila achieving a greater or achieving population protection or a bigger fraction, hopefully about 70-80% of its population being inoculated already. We are optimistic that the government will allow more retailers to open and allow more guests to dine in. So that should have a positive impact on consumer foot traffic in malls across Metro Manila. And usually the consumer spending is really fueled by remittances. And looking at 2020 remittances were what, $33 billion, and the central bank is projecting remittances to grow by 4% this year. And imagine $33 billion being injected to the domestic economy. That is really big, especially for an economy such as the Philippines, wherein 70% is still dominated by consumer spending. And typically, Filipinos really spend a lot during Christmas season, during the fourth quarter of the year. So we're really still optimistic that consumer patterns and spending will pick up starting fourth quarter of this year. Okta Research is saying that perhaps we're finally over the worst, especially talking about the COVID numbers here in Metro Manila. But hopefully, that also results in greater spending amongst Filipinos, locals, and even households that are relying on OFW remittances. And that should have a positive impact on occupancies as well as retail rents. So we're still are optimistic, and hopefully by 2022 there will be a greater economic growth for the Philippines.
All right, thank you, Mr. Joey. And there's also one for Mr. Dennis. Uh, an issue surrounding digitalization is digital divide. How do we create more accessible e-commerce and logistics services for smaller businesses? On Prosperna's part, how do they have done it? How did they did it?
Yeah, yeah. Good question. And, I think there's going to be some exciting things. And Today, we're partnering with Philippine MSMEs, and I truly use that word partner in a very serious manner. So, we've made our software platform, number one, really easy so that if someone doesn't have any experience, they don't need to be a techie, RJ. And so they something that they can do themselves without hiring expensive developers, because the cost of developers is really going up as the global demand and adoption of technology is ever increasing. It's not just the Philippines; it's everywhere around the world, right? The second thing is when I say partner, we have a plan that's a free forever plan, right? And we basically only make money when the merchant makes money. And so together, we're making that investment in our community and our economy, so that we can all grow and all survive and get past and find how the world and the way and business will operate in the future, right? So just a couple things that that we're hoping will help our small businesses here in the Philippines.
All right, thank you both. And so, indeed, the future of logistics and e-commerce will require a lot of innovations, use of new techs and data to improve customer experience, as well as improve sustainability and profit margins. Now, it's time for the closing statements from both of our speakers. Let's have Mr. Velasco first and Mr. Bonda. Mr. Dennis.
Yeah, thanks, RJ, and again, Joey, thanks as well. It's been great to be here on the panel with you. But for me, as I mentioned, it's nothing but exciting, exciting, and more excitement for, I believe, the times ahead for everyone in the Philippines and the Prosper Nation. Why? Because even prior to COVID, e-commerce was growing, north of 36% on a compounded annual growth rate for the next 5 years. So this has just opened up the opportunity for people to take a step of courage, right, to explore. And it's known to, again, bring products and services to market faster and increase your reach. So if you're really in business for the long term, right, e-commerce is a great way for you to get your business to that next level. So for consumers, merchants, even the sustainability of the Philippines as a country, part of our land, Mother Earth, I think we can all win. We can all win by adapting and embracing technology. And if Philippine companies and MSMEs, RJ, if we can gain that courage and just find the right friend in the e-commerce and the logistics business, this can be an amazing time in the next 10 years for our economy, where we create more next generation business leaders and success stories than ever before, right? So that's what I'm looking forward to.
Thank you, Mr. Dennis. Now, Mr. Bonda.
Thank you, RJ and Dennis. It was a pleasure being part of this discussion. I also learned a lot, but RJ, definitely we are still optimistic with the growth prospect of the retail sector here in the Philippines. We believe that with the sustained inflow of OFW remittances and the Filipinos continue to be deployed abroad, especially in economies that are starting to recover, US, UK, we believe that remittances will continue to be sent into the Philippines, and that should propel the country's growth, especially with remittances accounting for about a tenth of the country's economy. But in the retail sector specifically, we believe that the name of the game is that the clicks should continue implementing the bricks, meaning e-commerce, online shopping trends, technologies should be tapped to complement your physical mall space. And we are seeing a lot of interesting technologies that are being deployed by developers to tap and to be proactive in in capturing the demand from Filipino consumers. You have, for instance, the self-checkout systems being deployed already by a lot of mall operators. Definitely, data capturing systems, applications should also be maximized. More personal shopping services. I think a lot of mall operators are already implementing this, and the game right now is how do they outskill the competition? How do they gain that edge over their competitors? Because almost all mall operators are already providing this personal shopping services. I think the need is to be more specific, bespoke, and be more customized with the services that they provide. And just to close the retail loop, there should be more modern warehouses to support the demand for an economy that will continue to grow, and a Philippine economy that will continue to rely on online shopping and e-commerce. So those are our 3 cents. I'm using 3 cents because we need to factor in inflation. So those are just some of the insights that Colliers Philippines provides. So thank you for inviting us.
All right. Many thanks to our speakers for sharing your insights, Mr. Bondoc, Mr. Velasco. And now for making this session possible, also thank you, Globe Telecom Incorporated. So our partner organizations, British Chamber of Commerce of the Philippines, Bank Marketing Association of the Philippines, Management Association of the Philippines, as well as Philippine Chamber of Commerce and Industry. And so our media partner, the Philippine Star. Be sure to tune in to Business World's social media pages to be updated on our next projects. Again, this is RJ and this has been Business World Insights. Good afternoon.
Sa pagpatak ng ulan, sa pagsubok na dumaraan, may tapang kang harap, lilipad kang may pangarap. Lilipad kang may pangarap.
Kailan ay di mag-iisa, susulong ka ng may kasama, may tapang kang haharap.
Lilipad kang may pangarap. Lilipad kang may pangarap. Simula na ng bukas, ngayon na, ngayon na. Simula na ng bukas, ngayon na, ngayon na. Simula na ng bukas, ngayon na, ngayon na, ngayon na.
Sabay sa pagbabago,
Harapin ang bagong mundo.